start because we have quite a big agenda for tonight. Welcome to everyone. It's lovely to be in Artisan Eats. This is such a hospitable area, and so kind of Joe is to have us here every time we suggest it. Our next meeting here will actually be on a Monday, the 8th of November, when we have our district governor visiting us, which is quite something. We're going to have a dinner, right? We're having a dinner, that's right. So thanks for everyone. I'd like to welcome those who are guests tonight. Colleen, Shirley, of course Cathy, our star guest, Sheila, and I think that's about it. Thanks so much for coming, and I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting evening. Now, for those of you who don't know, we usually start off the meeting with a Rotary moment, and I have to grab someone who will then spend a few minutes talking about something that inspires them or something to do with Rotary. And the lucky person who I asked to do it this evening and who said right away, thank goodness, is Damien Bryan. So, Damien.
Well, today's an auspicious day because 80 years ago, today, October 14, Outward Bound was born, and by a guy called Kurt Hahn. And Kurt Hahn was an inspirational man who was an educator who was way out of the box in his era, in the 20s and 30s and 40s. Some of the things, I knew a bit about him, but I did a little research, and he ended up, he was instrumental in the foundation of the Salem School in 1920, Gordonston, 1934, famous school of the world's both educated. Outward Bound, 1941. He instituted the Duke of Edinburgh Award, 1956. He started Atlantic College and United World College in the 60s. Round Square Schools in 1966, and the International Baccalaureate, the IB system in 1968. Wow. So incredible man. Anyway, the interesting part of all this is that going back to the Outward Bound thing, which is dear to my heart because I worked there for a few years, and that's where I met Brenda. She worked there as well. And Kurt Hahn was approached in the war years, in the early 40s, by Lawrence Holt, who had a shipping line. He looked after he owned all the merchant ships, and the government, because the war was on, they were all taken over by the government. And anyone who was young but not fit enough to join the armed forces was sent to the merchant navy. And that was also the home of all the old fellas. And so, so there's all these ships out in the Atlantic with old guys and young guys who weren't fit to be soldiers. And they still, of course, as you know, got torpedoed and shot by German ships and whatnot. And what was happening was the ships were sinking. And the old guys, everyone was getting the lifeboats. The old guys were surviving, and the young guys were perishing. And Lawrence Holt was like, what's going on here, And Kurt Hahn said, well, these guys don't have any, young fellas don't have any intelligence. They haven't had life experiences. They haven't had their heart broken. They haven't held a newborn baby. They haven't kissed their mother goodbye on a deathbed yet. They don't have life experience that these old fellas have, and they've got resilience, and that's why they can handle being in the lifeboat for 10 days without food, but young guys perish. And so he said, and so anyway, he convinced Lawrence Holt to fund a program, land-based program, that would give young people, men and women, but at the time, young men, teaching some resilience. And he did a 40-day land-based course, and they had to do the course before they got this foot on a ship, and it turned everything around. And so the statistics changed almost overnight. That was the beginning of the Outward Bound School, which Kurt Hahn hated the name, but Lawrence Holt insisted on it. And as it turned out, he finally admitted that, that's what made the place, because the blue Peter flag that a ship flies when it leaves port, it's a blue flag with a white square in the middle of it. And that's the flag that a ship flies when it's outward bound from its home port. And so, and after you did a course at Outward Bound, they gave you a tiny little flag, a little pin, put on your shirt, and it would be that flag after you successfully did a 26-day course. You converted down to a 26-day course around the world. And so it sort of, it reminds me that, this one guy had this vision. He was out of the box, and he just found the right people and was supported at the right time, and he made a difference. And the Outward Bound schools are still making a difference around the world today. And there's a correlation there with the Rotary. It started out with this very small group of people that had some vision, and normal every day of the week people got involved and made a difference, and in some ways changed the world, and are still making an impact today. The things that on the grand scale, the things like polio and stuff like that, eradication, are obviously unbelievable. But our little club that punches above its weight, we make a difference in our community, and it's the culmination of all those little things that make a difference. So that's my inspiration for the day.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Damien. I actually ran the Duke of Edinburgh program at my school for many years, and it was a great program. The kids really enjoyed it. It was in the time when no one worried about insurance, and I was cycling kids on the highway out to Horseshoe Bay and along the highway to Vancouver Island, and just me on my little bike and 14 kids behind me. The liability, but no one cared. And then suddenly everyone said, "Oh my God, you can't do that. Someone might sue you." Anyway, thanks so much, Damien. That Outward Bound program is a fabulous one. We all agree with that. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Cathy Peters. Most of you know her already, so she doesn't need much introduction. I met her when she was a student teacher at Sentinel Secondary many years ago. And then I re-met her. Her name was Cathy Bronner in those days, and actually I taught her younger sister, Suzanne. And then we met her later on Bowen, because she and Alan were great sailors, and we loved sailing too, so we had a lot in common. And she has three lovely children whom we used to know. They were a bit younger than ours, but still, they were around. And then she disappeared a year ago and is now living in North Vancouver after living many years in Bowen. How many years? 37. Oh, wow. 37.
102.
Wow. So yeah, it's great to have her here this evening, and I knew nothing about her interest in human trafficking, human sex trafficking at all, until I just somewhere on the internet I said, "Oh, Cathy Peters." So we are really happy to have you here, and thanks very much for what you're about to say. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. So I don't need to introduce you anymore. Please just go ahead.
Okay, so I've got my classroom set up. As you all know, I was a teacher, and I've been working on this issue of human trafficking, child sex trafficking, and sexual exploitation for over 40 years. So it's been a long, long, long time. I've been working on this 7 years full time, and I present to every politician in British Columbia knows me. Every MP in Canada knows me. Every senator in Canada knows me. Every premier knows me. All of law enforcement knows me in British Columbia. And I work very closely with the RCMP at Green Timbers. And I work closely with Vancouver Police Department, Victoria Police Department. And the highlight is I've been discovered internationally, and I've been asked to present at a global summit in February. And it's talking about the impact of pornography on our youth today. So it's the first global summit of its kind. It's all the top researchers and academics in the world have been asked to present at this, and me. And I said to my husband, I don't have a PhD. I'm not a researcher, I'm not an academic. But what they liked was the fact that I'm reaching out and I'm educating law enforcement. I'm getting to all the politicians, that's the big one. And I'm reaching the public. Why? It's just I'm a teacher and I'm a mother bear. If the passion comes through, it's because I'm a mother bear. I have heard the most gruesome stories, but I'm an optimist. And I've learned you can actually make a difference being one person. And Damien, I love you talk about Outward Bound. I did Outward Bound. It changed my life. And Rotary, Alan did Rotary. You all need to know this. It changed his life. I mean, the reason Alan went into architecture was because of Rotary. He did Rotary Exchange in Mexico, and he ended up taking art lessons with a local artist. And he discovered that he loved doing art. So when he came home, instead of doing the engineering degree he was going to do, he switched over to architecture. And many of you know about the beautiful homes that he's designed and built. And of course, Steve has worked for us forever. I've known Steve from high school, so we go way, way, way back. So there's a lot of history here. I mean, I'm passionate for Bowen Island. And I said to Hillary, I'm not going to do a Zoom meeting. I'm coming here to the island. And I came here on an earlier ferry, and I was like 2 hours just hanging around at the Ready Potato and the post office talking to everybody. And then I just went for a little drive, and I knew everybody along the way. So I had to come back here. I don't come back here very often. Alan still has a bit of work here, but he's doing more design work now, so he doesn't have to come back to do this construction. And I'm getting so many opportunities now to present more in person. I'm doing the Rotary for West Vancouver next week. And here's an odd one, Mississauga Rotary. And that's going to be in November sometime. Now, they actually want to give money and help out financially. So I'm going to give you some projects to do if you want to step up for that. I don't ask to be paid. Everything I do is for free. I'm not an NGO. I'm a private citizen doing this because there's nobody else in the province. So let me just jump right in with my presentation. I'm going to give you my 8-minute city council presentation. So you're just going to get basic what I do to every city council. And just in the spring alone, I presented to 100 city councils. I was doing up to 5 a day, and that's all over BC. So you all know that I'm Cathy Peters. I'm a retired inner city high school teacher. I taught life skills over 40 years ago in the Lower Mainland. Underage prostitution, which is human sex trafficking, was occurring in the area that I taught in the Lower Mainland, right next to the King George Highway. Anybody heard of the King George Highway? That is still a kiddie stroll today, 40 years later. Many of my students were involved in gangs, drugs, prostitution, and the police dogs came through our school almost every day of the week. And I was one of the few female teachers they hired. And I said to Hillary, they said, we're hiring you because we want you to stop gang involvement and address the problem with the girls going into the sex industry. That was my assignment. So needless to say, I've loved it. And if anybody knows me, I think Colleen knows me a little bit and Steve knows me. I love a challenge and I love giving hope to anybody, especially to the hopeless. I love to inspire them to make something wonderful out of their lives. And the wonderful thing was teaching students that everybody else had written off. Those are the students I love teaching best. Because if you could turn the light, I just call it turning on the light switch. If you turn on the switch, they can make something of their lives. I coach sports, and that was an avenue of success for many of my students. The school I taught in 40 years ago in the Lower Mainland was pretty extreme, like we had bars on the windows, but it is now the new normal in most schools and communities. So what has changed? What has happened? So I've learned about the crime of human sex trafficking, and now it's child sex trafficking as the buying and selling of women and children for sex. And that is what I want to stop in British Columbia. So I present to the public, politicians, and the police. Human sex trafficking and sexual exploitation, it is for the purpose of prostitution, is the fastest growing crime in the world. And nobody knows that. And it's very much happening here on Bowen Island and very much here in BC. So what is human trafficking? It's the recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, concealing, harboring, or exercising control over a person for the purpose of exploiting them. So the key word is exploitation. It is modern day slavery. So here are the stats. 13 years of age is the average age of recruitment. Much, much, much younger for Indigenous girls. But the average age now in Vancouver and Surrey is 10, 11, and 12 years of age. COVID has made this much worse because traffickers lure online. They are very organized and very sophisticated. Here's the shocker. 54% involved in the sex trade are Indigenous. They are severely overrepresented in the sex industry. This is the worst case of systemic racism in the country. I did share this recently with all of the BC Indigenous chiefs and the Federal Minister of Justice, David Lametti, a couple of months ago. At the very least, and here's a project you could do, Indigenous women and girls want forensic nurses and rape kits. You know why? Because then they can charge their perpetrators. Because otherwise they show up at the hospital and say, well, he did it, no proof. So Colleen, you would understand this. If they got a rape kit and a forensic nurse who can do the examination right away, they've got proof about who did it. And guess what? Buyers of sex won't buy if they know they could get caught. It's a very simple deterrent. If a John knows he could get caught, he will not buy. And all the research I've seen, every John who gets caught goes, if I knew I was going to get caught, I would have never bought sex. I would have never done it, okay? 82% involved, here's another shocker, involved in prostitution had childhood sexual assault or incest. So incest is the big one, especially in the Indigenous communities. That is boot camp for prostitution later. 72% in the sex trade live with PTSD. Actually, it's complex PTSD. It's way, way worse. Sorry, that's my phone. This is the worst form of trauma a human being can experience. 95% in prostitution want to leave. It is not a choice. It is not a job. 86% have housing needs. That's no surprise. 82% need drug rehab. Why? Drugs and sex go together, or the sex trade. And here's the new stat. 84% of prostituted persons are pimped out or trafficked. 84%. So when these girls are on TV and go, I just love doing this, I'm empowered, it's wonderful. Well, that's not the silent majority that I'm talking about. That's the 1 to 2 to 3% high-end escorts that are doing it. They don't have a pimp. But the ones that I speak for, particularly the Indigenous and the Asian girls, they are trafficked and pimped. So you've got organized crime and international crime syndicate very involved here in BC. So I've been raising awareness about this issue to every single city council. It's 190 in BC, every MLA, every MP, and every police agency ever since a law called the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. You do not want to lose this law. This is a federal law we currently have. The sex industry want this law repealed. We don't want to lose it. If we lose this law, and I'll explain it in a minute very simply, the Indigenous women and girls will be first casualties. It will make the residential schools look like nothing. So this is the law I need you to know about. So our MP is Patrick Weiler. Pick up the phone and say, Patrick, we heard Cathy Peters speaking, that was me, and said we don't want that law repealed. And at this point, Trudeau could repeal it, and the NDP would like to repeal it. I don't mean to be partisan. It should not be a partisan issue at all. So this is a law we want to keep. Very, very important. Otherwise, Canada changes overnight. We have the longest border in the world with the United States. We will become America's brothel overnight.
Why do they want to? Why did the NDP?
You know what? I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to the question, but remember that question, okay? That's a really important question. So I've been raising awareness about this law. So there's 4 parts to it. First of all, number 1, it targets the buyer of sex. So the John and the profiteer, the trafficker, the pimp, exploiter, they are charged. They are criminalized. Number 2, It recognizes that the seller of sex is usually a victim, well, is a victim, and is immune from prosecution. Number 3, there's exit strategies in place, they're supposed to be, to help these girls get out. And number 4, there's supposed to be prevention education in place. BC's not doing any of those. The only thing they're doing is leaving the girls in the boat. They're not helping them. They're ignoring them. So in the downtown east side, have any of you been down there lately? There is, yeah, it's just a hellhole. So the police have been told to stay away, just leave them alone. But they're not getting any help. That's the big problem. So the law focuses on the source of harm to buyers of sex and profiteers. So what I love is the Artisan Eats have come up with a great campaign called I'm Not For Sale campaign. So what the government basically was saying is that our women and girls are full human beings with dignity and human rights. Vancouver and Toronto are the 2 global tourism, sex tourism hotspots in Canada. At least in Toronto, there's law enforcement and there's public awareness. In Vancouver, there's nothing. And I just got an email today, the Vancouver Police Board actually want me to present. That is unbelievable. It's very hard to get to do any presentations with Vancouver. Surrey Police Board had me present just a few weeks ago, and that was amazing because, you know, they have told the RCMP to leave, and they now have their own police agency. Surrey is the crime capital of Canada, but you know which city now has become very dangerous and is really sparked? I don't know if you're watching the news. It's Victoria. Victoria is considered the crime capital right now in the country, along with Surrey. So you've got to ask why. So the big fundraiser is human trafficking. That's where all the money is. What people don't know is that Canada is a child sex tourism destination, and people don't know that. Where did I get that from? The Trafficking in Persons report. It is put out by the US State Department, and they analyze all the countries in the world about how they are doing on human trafficking. So child sex tourism in Canada, if you can imagine that, and it's bad here in BC. The book that I love is, and it's just come out, and it's written by a Winnipeg police officer. It's called Sex Industry Slavery, Protecting Canada's Youth. So I've worked with him. He's just written another book on Indigenous, and all the stats are in here. In Manitoba, it's 70% that are in the sex trade are Indigenous. In Winnipeg, it's 90%. So the Indigenous are severely overrepresented in the sex trade. That is my concern. Here's my website, www.beamazing campaign. So I want to be very positive because I want to empower all of you to help me stop this crime. So the global sex trade is growing really, really fast. It's targeting our children because that's where the money is. It's fueled by the internet. That's where most of the luring is taking place. So what are the factors? Globalization, unregulated technology. If any of you have grandchildren or children, boy, the technology now is scary. I just cannot believe what I'm learning almost daily, what is going on online. And parents have no clue. Limited law enforcement and almost no prevention education. So I'm doing the prevention education piece. We have in Canada a brand new national human trafficking hotline number. Just for fun, I call it. I would suggest if anybody's writing down notes, write down this number. If you suspect anybody's being trafficked on this island or a relative you know or anything you're kind of suspicious about, this is the number you call. You can get help anywhere in Canada. And I'm having a meeting tomorrow with the executive director. Her complaint to me is she gets no calls from BC. All her calls are from Alberta and all the other provinces, especially Ontario. No calls from BC. Why? There's no public awareness here. Nobody knows about this. My biggest problem, and you know, Colleen is my biggest hero because I've talked about with Colleen what I've been doing for a number of years, and she keeps going, but at least, you know, she's been here. At least you believed me. At least you believed me. The majority of people don't believe me, by far. I know Shelley believes me because Shelley's done some fantastic work in this area. But Canadians on the whole are nice people, don't talk about nasty things. It all happens down south. Down south is actually decades ahead of us in addressing this problem. Canadians were nice, and we don't talk about nasty things. Pornography is the fuel. And I call it the sex industry universe. And that's prostitution, that's human trafficking, that's child sex trafficking. Pornography is the big problem. Men and boys, and unfortunately, it's our girls watching pornography now too, because they want to know how to have sex. Men and boys are the buyers of sex. This is a gendered issue. They are the key to end exploitation. Has anybody here heard of the Moose Hide campaign? What? Oh, it's an Indigenous initiative to help Indigenous men and boys learn how to protect their women and girls. You haven't heard of it? Everybody goes around wearing a moose hide. Oh, you're Rotary. You need to know about the Moose Hide campaign. Now, the thing with the Moose Hide campaign, I love them. They just don't go far enough. And they're really not dealing with the issue of sexual exploitation. So what can you do? So when I present to City Council, I say, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to reduce the demand and you need to diminish the supply. Super simple. So how do you reduce the demand? Well, again, education, obviously, for both are important. But I'm going to give you a list of the businesses, and I want you to think of Bowen Island. Are these businesses actually here? So you want to deal with any complicit businesses, and diminish the supply is education. And we've just got to teach our children about how to stay safe, mainly online. So here are the businesses that are typically complicit. Number one is always unregistered massage and body rub parlors. If you've got those and they're not registered, very possibly there's human trafficking involved. Now, Burnaby, I think it's Burnaby and Port Coquitlam that made the decision not to have any. And so I put pressure on every city council. You don't want unregistered massage and body rub parlors. It's really simple. You will cut human sex trafficking in half if you just remove those. Nail spas, those are filled with Asian girls. And they do offer services anytime, day or night, at your home, and they do home parties. So what is that? Holistic health centers, day spas, modeling agencies. That's a big one. Tattoo parlors. Traffickers will tattoo their product, their girls, to say that they own them. And the tattoos are diamonds or crowns or their initials. It's like they own them like cattle. They are branded with tattoos. So tattoo parlors are very complicit with this. Escort services, no surprise. Cheap bars and hotels. Men's clubs are notorious. And I don't have to say anything about the men's clubs in downtown Vancouver. Airbnb is notorious. They run micro brothels. And we also have communities now that are not allowing Airbnb. VRBO, casinos, strip clubs. Anybody knows who owns strip clubs? Hells Angels owns the strip clubs in Canada. Organized crime clubhouses, you don't want those. You can get rid of those really quite easily with land use bylaws. That's what they did in Manitoba. We're not doing that here in BC. Truck stops, bus stops, homeless camps, tent cities, work camps, dance clubs, who would think? Pool halls, rec centers can all be typical covers for sex trafficking and exploitation. So the sex industry is now targeting our youth and children, and the schools are the recruiting grounds. The schools are the recruiting grounds now for gangs and for sex trafficking. The best deterrent, and I did get on CKNW to say it with Mike Smith, the best deterrent is a school liaison officer program. I don't know if you follow the news. They were removed out of Vancouver. That was 15 officers. They've been in Vancouver for almost 50 years. And they were the best trained officers in the whole agency. They were horrified. And Vancouver School Board, without due process, and the parents wanted to keep the officers, the students wanted to keep the officers, they got rid of them. And New West did the same thing. I then followed up and did a presentation to Richmond School Board and Burnaby School Board. They don't want to lose the officers. So an anti-police narrative is going to harm our communities. They're the only people trained to recognize gang recruitment and sex trafficking. So BC is the furthest behind in every province in Canada by decades. We are not enforcing the law, and we have no prevention education. So public awareness is completely lacking, and that's why I sent information to every politician, all the police, blah, blah, blah. So here's some typical questions that I get from grade 10 students. I present in high schools, I present in universities, I've been giving lectures in universities, but here's grade 10 girls. Can you give a general definition of sex trafficking? So I did that already, but here's the point. Sex trafficking is for the purpose of prostitution. You cannot de-link them. They go together. It doesn't mean every prostituted person is trafficked, but anybody that's trafficked is for the purpose of prostitution. Who's affected and who's targeted? So I mentioned it's a gendered issue. The majority of cases by far are under 25. I mentioned that 13 years of age is the average age. And again, the age is so young for Indigenous girls. Canada is a child sex tourism destination. I mentioned that. And it's not just the Indigenous, it's new migrants, it's LGBTQ, disabled, youth at risk, youth in care. They are all vulnerable. Any girl now under age 14 is vulnerable. And some boys. People say, well, how about boys? It's not where the money is. The money is the girls. What do traffickers look like? They're hot. They're good looking. They have nice cars. They have a lot of money. They're typically between 17 and 34 years of age, and they would not exist if there wasn't a demand. It's because there's a demand for paid sex. The traffickers simply meet the demand because they make so much money. They make hundreds of thousands of dollars per victim, per year, tax-free. Crime follows the money. The majority of traffickers are male, but more are female, more and more, especially in schools. How does it happen? How does manipulation occur? The majority of it is online, on the social media platforms, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Kik, TikTok. I would say Instagram and TikTok probably are really bad. Video game sites, chat rooms, and even Pinterest. Has anybody heard of OnlyFans? Oh, no? Okay, you don't want anybody on OnlyFans. They will get prostituted if they're pulled into that. So what traffickers do, they find gorgeous girls on Instagram and TikTok, get them over to OnlyFans. OnlyFans is blocked, so law enforcement can't see what's going on. And then the next step is the girls are sold. They become escorts. Traffickers lure, I mentioned, wherever there's youth congregating. The typical manipulation is by boyfriending or love bombing. They pretend to be a boyfriend. When I present to Indigenous girls, they go, my boyfriend, my boyfriend, my boyfriend. I go, oh, have you ever met him? Well, no. Well, how did you meet him? Online. But you never met him in person. No, but he's my boyfriend. That's how it happens. The boyfriends promise expensive gifts, presents, trips, and anything the parents will not give. These are very appealing tactics because young people simply want to be loved and they want friends. The only problem is these tactics are all a lie, because if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Okay, so what happens to victims of human trafficking? It's a deadly industry. It is not work. Victims end up drug addicted, mentally ill, some of them servicing up to 10 to 60 men a night, 7 days a week. They commit suicide or they are murdered. Think Robert Pickton. That is the sex industry. Do not be fooled. Sex industry is neither glamorous or empowering. Only 5% ever get out. The cost to rehabilitate is about $60,000 a year for about 8 years. How do we prevent it? Enforcement of the law, education, the 2 E's. What are some signs that someone you know is being trafficked? They become very secretive. They have a much older boyfriend. And it may not be somebody you ever meet. Oh, they have really new clothes, jewelry. Gold chains are very popular. Change in dress. By the way, it was a teacher that caught the very first trafficker in BC, and he's now behind bars. It was a teacher recognized the changes in one of her students. Frequent sleepovers at a friend's house. Change in attitude in school and towards friends and family. Grades drop. They're exhausted. They have 2 cell phones. Oh, they have cuts and bruises. They have new tattoos that they boast about. Those tattoos, we all know, are cool. And here's one that's a bit startling. Strangulation marks around the neck. The forensic nurses I work with and ER docs tell me that's what they're seeing. But that's because that's become common in porn. Watching porn, there's a lot of strangulation. So how can I help? So what can you do to make a difference? So here's my pamphlet, and I've got all kinds of stuff that you guys could pick up. My pamphlets are over here. And basically what I say is learn, share, and alert. Learn about this issue, which you're doing, share and talk about it with your family and friends, and alert people in power. That's your politicians and your law enforcement, and your educators, and I mean, Colleen's here, your health providers, any sort of stakeholders. Anybody listening can make a difference. We all have a voice, and we will save lives if we speak about this. So what can you do in Rotary? Support any of the agencies, and I'm going to name a whole bunch of agencies here in a minute. There's not many that actually deal with this issue. And I will mention them to you. You can certainly support them. You can buy my book. Now, I put my bookmarks. Oh, Colleen, are they behind you somewhere? Or where did I put my bookmarks? I brought all my bookmarks with me. Did you find my bookmarks? No bookmarks?
Are they behind Robin? What do they look like?
Okay, they're just really small bookmarks and they say warning on them. Okay, your job is to find my bookmarks. I brought a whole little stack of them. Colleen, are you sure they're not behind the one?
Robin's got it.
No, those are postcards. No, actual bookmarks of my book.
No, I got money here.
Oh, these things.
Nope, not that. Okay, I'm not going to worry about
They'll
they'll show up at some point. Anyways, I've written a book. That's the good news. I've written a book called Morning, and Damien, you'll be interested in this. I hope you get the book. It's about our sailing trip that we did 20 years ago with our children. Any money I make, and it's on Amazon.ca. It's just called Morning. If anybody gets my book, it helps pay for what I do because nobody's paying me for what I do. Yeah, get me to speak to more Rotaries and get me to speak at a Rotary conference. Okay, so what organizations should you know about? Well, provincially, we do. You don't need to give them in your taxes, but Victim Link is a number that you can call if you need help. So Victim Link, and then I mentioned the center, the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. So I've got their posters here. I got postcards, and I have wallet cards. That number is really important. So here are the three organizations I recommend supporting. Children of the Street Society. They present in the schools. They do great work. Sexual Exploitation Education. I work with this girl, Tiana Sharafi. And the Joy Smith Foundation. They have a national education center for the whole country. So those would be the three organizations I'd really encourage you to support. In terms of exit strategies, who's helping the girls out of the sex industry? It's the Salvation Army. Anybody heard of Deborah's Gate? They're in the downtown east side. It's the best 24/7 wraparound program in North America. Well, guess why it's so good? It's because the problem is so bad here. But certainly Salvation Army, fantastic work. Servants Anonymous, they also do rehab. And you've all heard of Covenant House. They actually work with homeless trafficked youth in BC, and they're the only ones that do it. So I would certainly support those. In terms of internationally, it's more American. This is where parents can get help, defend young minds, and they just tell me what's going on online. Protect Young Eyes, excellent, and Parents Against Child Sexual Abuse. Those three organizations are outstanding, and you'll get all the information and help that you need. There's another organization I like, and it's out of Manitoba. They're really good. If you think of a child that's being bullied online, you can call them. It's the Canadian Centre for the Protection of Children, and that's out of Manitoba. But I'll always say, if you suspect anything, call the police. Please, please, please. I talked to BPD the other day, and I said, I speak to you guys. What do I need to tell them? And they said, please report to the police. Now, there's sort of a stigmatization of police going on right now. I love working with them. They are the most diverse group. Like, they have the police department in sex crimes. They're all women. A lot of women of color. That's who was in the schools working. So the officers are excellent and well trained. And we also now in the RCMP have a lot of Indigenous police officers, and they are exceptional. I have brought a few of my books. I always talk about Robert Picton, and I made myself read about his story. This should have never happened. He's going to get out in, 10 or 15 years. His brother is out. And the funny thing is, who's our public safety minister provincially? It's Mike Farnorth from Port Coquitlam. So you think that he'd be really concerned about this whole issue. Great Canadian book. It's called The True Story of Canadian Human Trafficking by Joyce Smith. Very, very readable. I brought sort of my library along with me. My husband can't read any of these books. They get him too upset, but this book is actually readable. Pornland, the expert in the world on porn research is Dr. Gail Dimes. And the fun thing is at this global summit, she's going to be one of the presenters. So what an honor to present with Gail Dimes. It's always going to be somebody's daughter. And this book, I learned about the Halifax, Toronto pimping ring. Did you know that pimping and trafficking really started in Halifax? That's where I'm from. And it started with a couple of gays. They've now spread across Canada. They are the guerrilla pimps. They're the dangerous ones. They're the ones that kidnap and kill, and they're dangerous. Most traffickers are Romeo pimps, but it is all getting much, much, much more violent. And I just want to say, in terms of getting girls into the sex industry, what men are doing now, traffickers are doing now, is saying, oh, hi, I'm having a party. Come to my party. And these girls go. And they can be 11 and 12 and 13. And the parents will go say, well, I guess you can go. Don't say no. Well, that's where they get introduced to drugs, to alcohol. They will be raped. They be gang raped. It will all be on film. Extortion. They're in. That's how quickly it's happening. There's no grooming anymore. It's just happening that quickly. The other thing they do, have you heard of the term sexting? Yeah. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? They show their body parts online, and it's become very normalized. It's criminal code to do it. So a girl can just lift up her top, or a boy pulls down his pants. The problem is that the predators are looking for those photographs and then use it as currency to extort those young people. So Ratea Parsons, do you remember that name, from Nova Scotia? And there's another name apparently I'm not allowed to even say anymore. So sextortion is big. So what's happening online, I was just saying to Shelley, it's now cyber mobs. You get a whole mob online that will attack these girls and some boys. And then you get something now called cyber sex terrorism, a new term, cyber sex terrorism, where these girls are literally scared to death and end up killing themselves. So I don't mean to frighten you. I'm here to actually empower you, because you need to talk about this with your family and friends. And I always say, get your children or grandchildren to teach you about how to stay safe online. Pretend you're stupid.
That's not difficult.
And just go, I say this to my children all the time, how can I be safe online? And like Joshua, Ron, you know Joshua, and Colleen, you know Joshua. Joshua goes, well, Mom, you gotta, like he tells me exactly how to stay safe online. My youngest is a doctor. She's all over me. Mom, this is how you're safe. I am not allowed to be on any social media. They have forbidden me. I am not allowed, because they know I'd be on it all the time. So they're very concerned about that. So your children and grandchildren will teach you how to be safe. Anyways, I should open it up for questions, because I now have to talk way too much.
Wow. No. Before we start the questions, there's a little bit of protocol. If you're online and you'd like to ask a question, and we have 3 or 4 people online, can you go to reactions and to raise your hand? Secondly, if those of us who are here and you would like to ask a question or make a comment, you put up your hands like this and we'll work it out, because Robert knows how to do it.
So
Colleen
the
is
federal
first.
law that you're worried about repealing, why does the government want to repeal it?
That's the question of the day, because they're listening to the sex industry. And their line is, well, the sex workers tell us they're not safe, and they need it repealed so that we are safe. Because we're doing everything in the dark and undercover, and we need to be able to do it out in the open so everybody can see and watch, and so that we are safe and protected. That is their line. They use the safety line. The funny thing is, what it actually does, full decriminalization, actually empowers the pimp, they become businessmen, and empowers the buyers. Anytime you have full decriminalization of prostitution, think Netherlands, Germany, Nevada, Thailand, New Zealand, your human trafficking takes off. Your child sex trafficking takes off. If men and boys think it's okay to buy sex, they will. The demand increases, you've got to increase your supply. Where do you get your supply from? It's going to be your most vulnerable. In our case in Canada, it's our Indigenous. And I'm presenting a lot to the Indigenous and to their communities. They're losing their girls all the time. And Shelley, you probably know this. They are so vulnerable. And because they live with generational sexual trauma, that's almost boot camp for the sex trade. And if they're not safe in their communities, and many are not, they run. Where do they end up? Downtown East Side and Surrey. Does that answer your question? Yep. This is a smart bunch. I need some good questions.
I have a question.
Hillary.
It's probably for Colleen more than anyone else. Is this a problem on Bowen Island? Do we,
I have no idea.
we have no idea. I guess what we, I mean, we're all so nice on Bowen Island. We all know everyone else. We all think that we're
Nobody has ever come in to be
Not
here.
anymore.
Talk about this 7 years old.
yeah.
But I wouldn't, if anybody wants. Begin, label.
Yeah. What
I
about you?
found my bookmarks. So these are my bookmarks. And again, I think of you, Damien, because we now have a boat again. We're back to sailing. And this describes our sailing trip. It's a good read. And if you get my book, again, it pays me to keep doing this, then you write a response on Amazon so more people buy my book. So I'm thrilled to offer this for the first time to Bowen Island, which obviously I should because all good things started here for our family. So I'm just going to pass these out. Help yourself. I mean, you can have their bookmarks. Everybody has bookmarks.
Take it to Phoenix.
I will. The other thing here's my ask. Here's where you could really help me. I do have a petition that a member of parliament has worked with me on. And Brad Biss, he did get reelected. He's Matsui Mission, Fraser Canyon. And he has stood up in the House of Commons 5 times now to talk about supporting that law that I mentioned. Please sign this petition. If I get 25 signatures, and I believe I got on here right now, I got 6. See, I haven't been doing in-person presentations. Even if I could get everybody here to sign, and you've got to put down your name and your address and your signature, a paper petition, people don't know this, is really powerful. Every 25 signatures, you get 1 minute to stand up in the House of Commons. An electronic petition, you can have 50,000 signatures and you can only stand up for 1 minute in the House of Commons. So I prefer the paper petition. During COVID, it's made it difficult. So my petitions, if you want to take one in action, again, this is where Rotary could hugely help me. I put a whole bunch of petitions here right behind Shelley. If you can get 25 signatures and you just have to, all the instructions are at the bottom, who you mail the petition to. It's free postage to Brad Biss in Ottawa, and then he will stand up in the House of Commons. And that is a really powerful, powerful thing to have an MP stand up in the House of Commons. So again, Rotary, you guys are so good with action. You want action. Here's an action thing that you can do. And I'm just going to pass this around. I got my
Now
can.
tell me.
It's sterilized. There you
We
go.
each take one of these and pass it around in kind of different order. Do they actually read who?
Yes, they do.
What a pity.
They do. Any other
We could
questions?
Multiply ourselves out by
Yes.
10.
Yeah, you had your question.
What you're saying is incredibly compelling. Everything you say is compelling, and yet it sounds like this is not the newest thing in the world. This is the oldest profession, and yet the community is not rising up against it. So there must be some opposition. Can you speak for the opposition and tell me why there is a legitimate opposition?
The opposition is the sex industry. The opposition and the sex industry is very involved with organized crime and international crime syndicates. That is what is happening in these. We've got a game problem right now. I'm sure you're all aware of it if you're following the news. And
What problem?
they are,
Game.
they make a lot of money from human trafficking. This is their fundraiser. Hells Angels does human trafficking. It's their big money maker. Crime follows the money. It's that simple. It's all about the money. Now, if Johns didn't buy, this thing would end right away. So what we need to do is teach our boys to value the women in their lives. And when I speak in high schools, all the boys end up crying because they're all watching pornography, and Colleen knows that this is for a fact. They are so distorted in what they think sex looks like. They've been so lied to. They'll come out, I'll get 30 guys around me going, Mrs. Peters, nobody's told us that pornography is a lie. Nobody's told us this. We thought that's what you're supposed to do. And girls will come up to me and go, well, I've been watching pornography. I thought I'm supposed to be slapped around and hit and punched and sworn at and called names. And I go, no, that's not what sexual intimacy is supposed to look like. So we're the perfect age group where we can mentor our young people as to what sexual intimacy can and should look like. And it involves love and respect and gentleness and kindness and consideration and all those wonderful qualities that you and I all value, but our young people don't know about because their educator is the porn industry. The porn industry is massive. They're trying to hook very young boys as young as age 8. Because if they get a boy at age 8, they've got him for life. Because when he's young, his brain is very plastic. Those images go in and they stay in. So we have to counter that. So I'm a mother bear. When I present to the Indigenous, I say, I'm a mother bear. They love that. That's why they let me come back again and again and again. And here's the line I love best. Every man and boy needs to know there's a sacred part of a woman they have no right to. You see, the Indigenous love the word sacred. Every man and boy needs to know there's a sacred part of a woman they have no right to. I actually got that line from Vancouver Police Department. That's the line that they use. And I use that line all the time. We need to teach our men and boys how to care for the women and girls in their lives. That's the most important job that we can do. I mean, Colleen has a beautiful son. I've got a fabulous son. I mean, we're all over our boys about how they treat their wives. Terribly, terribly important. And then our children watch us. So we role model what works and what is worthy and what is wonderful and what is beautiful.
So you're looking for cultural change, not just legal change.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. It's got to be at the society level. Now, all the rest of Canada is getting this. It's just BC is not. So BC is more like Washington State, Oregon, and California. So what's happening in Vancouver is similar. I don't know if you've been down to Seattle lately. What's happening in Vancouver is very similar to Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. There's a documentary you can watch. It's called Fighting for the Soul of Seattle. I recommend you watch it because Vancouver is going down that path. I learned that from law enforcement. They said, watch that documentary. We don't want any of our communities to go down that road. Just realize Bowen Island is very close to Vancouver. And guess what? I've watched real estate over here take off, and this island has changed. In the year that we've been off the island, you've got a lot of people coming over. So the question to Colleen, is it happening here? Yes, absolutely it's happening here. Are there computers in every single home? That is how strangers are getting into your homes. That's how they do it. And most parents don't know how to protect the children. Anybody else? What a hard thing to listen to at this time of day. Oh my goodness, you were very brave to invite me.
Well, that's why we serve wine.
So Cathy, we've been talking about this for a long time. This is serious, we really need to talk to them. Somebody should be talking at the school. Well, I've said that to you for years. You should go to BIX. But
They don't want to hear
no
it.
interest in
They don't
BIX.
want to hear it.
They don't want to hear it. The parents don't seem to be advocating for you to talk at BIX or talk to any of the parents. There just seems to be this disinterest.
It is upsetting, but it is upsetting.
Well, and I've been talking to you, Catherine, for quite a while about it every time I go into Cave's Pharmacy. This spring was really telling. When that news about the Kamloops mass graves came out, that's when all the city councils all of a sudden said, Cathy, come and present to us. And I did like 100 presentations because they suddenly were connecting the dots. Now they're concerned because I'm saying, if we want to protect our Indigenous women and girls, we can't normalize the sex industry. You can't do that. And that's what we have to get across to our politicians' problems.
I was just wondering, you tied the problems of family and incest. And, is there some way of dealing with that?
Thank you for asking that question. So I presented to a whole bunch of Indigenous social workers this week, and it was a lovely group, and it was mixed. It was men and women, and it was the men that spoke up the most, and they basically said that their families were falling apart. They don't have those intact, strong families, and they need real help with that. And because there's so much pornography, and the men aren't treating their women well, and the girls are watching, it's just become very toxic. Their communities are very tight, and their communities, they're such beautiful people. I just love the Indigenous. They are so sensitive. They are beautiful. They are very deep thinking. They are thoughtful. They are oral. They're my best audience. When I speak to Indigenous, they listen because they share orally. They don't tend to write things down. But they're unsuspecting and they're damaged. So the sex traffickers know that and are taking advantage. So yes, what can they do in their own communities? That's the question. It was so lovely to be invited this week to speak to some of their social workers. And what they did actually was they taped me, because I can't keep doing, and you have to know this is exhausting to do this. I'm way too old to be doing this. And I said, well, tape it. And they said they're going to send it to all the Indigenous bands in BC, which is wonderful. So, I'm glad you're recording this. This is great. So just share it far and wide. I really am thrilled that Rotary is catching on to this. I was hoping Optimists might. It's your service groups that are going to make the difference, because you can start, well, for example, this petition, sign things, talk about it. You're action oriented. Come up with a project that you'd like to do. A project, if you want to, I'm going to recommend, encourage anything that's going to help the Indigenous women and girls, you will make a difference. So, I'm going to leave it up to you what you could come up with. But certainly they do want forensic nurses and they want rape kits. But I mentioned before, then they can actually charge the predators. And wouldn't that start to change things? Because they do get pulled into the work camps. That's not uncommon. Anybody else? I hope I've connected the dots a little bit for you. That we're losing a generation of youth. And somehow get them to talk to you so they can tell you what's going on. I just heard a new video game that's out and it's dreadful. And I wanted to tell you about it, but I've already forgotten the name of it. I was so shocked. It just keeps getting worse. And as parents, grandparents, learn about what is out there. You've got to become computer literate. The funny thing is, and again, Steve and Vaughn and Colleen, Joan, I think Joan knows all our children, Hillary and Robin knows all of our children. I actually know more than they do now. Is that not too funny? That is kind of cool. They actually go, okay, Mom, stop, enough. You want to be in that position. Okay, you really do, because you want to help them. They need help. They need guidance. And Damien, you said the word resilience. What we need today is resilient young people. That's what we need today. And in terms of social media, stranger danger. They're more likely to be targeted online than be kidnapped if they ride their bike out here. That's where it's going to happen. It's going to be online. Okay, did I give you hope? Was I positive? Hillary's standing up. Okay.
Well, Cathy, it must be exhausted because you've given us so much information in this short while that I'm just bombed by all these statistics and all this amazing stuff about what is going on, and very likely in our community. Our grandchildren are too young, thank goodness.
At the moment.
At the moment, exactly. But it is a worry for the future, because every kid has a computer nowadays, and many kids aren't regulated by their parents and what they watch. So it is a time bomb. And any way we can help you, you've suggested a whole lot of possibilities for us, and I'm sure we can follow through on a few of them, particularly signing petitions and maybe buying your book. You know, it's about sailing. You can resist a book about sailing, right, Damien? He's not listening. Anyway, thank you so much, and I hope that what you're doing bears a lot of fruit, because it's obvious that you are incredibly passionate about it. And I think it's amazing that you can carry that passion around and do it all selflessly, you know, without being paid. So many people say, you know, I will do this, but I want the money, you know, for myself, not just. And I think that's terrific. And so I think everyone will agree that it's been a very informative evening. And thank you.